Good day and welcome to another episode of Drew's Book Reviews. Today we get to continue on with our year-long series of the Year of the Poe. So I've got 7 more Edgar Allan Poe stories to tell you about today. So if you're interested, you want to know more, stay tuned because that is coming right up. Okay, welcome back to the channel. So it is the Year of the Poe here on Drew's Book Reviews as we're going through the short stories and collected works of Edgar Allan Poe all year long on this channel. And this month we get to go through 7 of Edgar Allan Poe's stories here on the channel. I've been having a lot of fun doing this series, and I've been having a lot of fun reading all the Poe stories, something I've never done before. And I'm glad that I have the opportunity to do this. So, first up, we have Message Found in a Bottle. Okay, so Message in a Bottle. This is the first of the Poe stories I read this past month. And this is maybe one of my favorites that I've read this month, possibly one of my favorites from the Poe stories I've read thus far throughout this book. The basic concept behind this story is you're shipwrecked at sea. You're cast adrift on the ocean on this damaged, nearly destroyed ship. You're among the lone survivor of this catastrophe that has happened to you. And you're just trying to survive. And as you're floating across the sea, you encounter another ship where you somehow manage to get aboard and become a stowaway. But the thing is, this ship that you've come across, it is not a normal ship. Or at least it doesn't seem that way. Poe's done a really good job of kind of giving this vibe within this story that this ship and its crew that you become a stowaway on isn't all it seems to be. As we hear our main character's description, which we never get a name for the main character. It's all written from the perspective of that character, but we never get the name for this character. But you really kind of get a sense of feel for the eeriness and creepiness of what is going on this ship. And while you're a stowaway, they seem completely oblivious to you even as you're walking among them. It's almost as if you're completely invisible. And it's just kind of this really macabre, deathly vibe to the story and to the description of what's going on within this particular story, which I thought was just really, really cool. I really enjoyed that aspect of this short story. A Message Found in a Bottle. It's just, and of course the whole time that he's on this ship, it's Message Found in a Bottle because he's writing out his experiences and eventually hoping to send that in a message in a bottle across the seas. But it really kind of had that zombie-ish or ghost ship feel to it, which kind of leads to the question, is the ship a ghost ship? Or you already dead? Maybe you're the ghost. Now, it doesn't come out and say that in the story, of course, but it definitely has the effect where once I was done reading that, I was wondering, like, wait a minute, is the ship the odd one out? Or am I, as the reader, as the character in the way that it's written, the odd one out? Am I the one that's maybe actually dead? Maybe this isn't a ghost ship and maybe I'm the ghost. So it really kind of had that awesome, fun, definitely kind of that deathly dark thematic vibe that Poe was famous for within this story. So that was a really fun one. I think it's probably my favorite, to be honest, of all the Poe stories that I've read this month. So Message Found in a Bottle, great read, really enjoyed that one. That was a good one for sure. Okay, so The Oval Portrait is the next in our list of stories by Poe this month. So this story is basically a description of a painting of a particular individual. So what's really interesting about this story is, even though it's just a description of a painting, it still managed to keep my attention in a really vivid way. So how Poe goes about writing this story is, it's not just about the picture, but it's about the painter. And he goes into detail about the passion and the love and the feel or vibe that the painter had while painting this oval portrait, which was a really interesting way to approach this story. And through that description, through our analysis of the passion put into making this painting and making it happen, we learn a little bit about the painter himself and who the portrait is of and why he painted this picture. And it's just really interesting to see how he described that. You could almost feel the passion and love and creativity this painter has and had for the creation of this portrait, and for the love that this person had for the picture that he was painting. So the oval portrait is basically the painter painting his wife and how much he loved and respected her, and you could really feel the passion that was put into this painting that is described in this story, with the way Poe goes into describing what is going on and what the painting is all about. So that was actually a really interesting approach to a story, in that it's not so much a story, it's just saying this is how it was done, and this is the painting, and this is how much we can tell the painter absolutely loved the subject of his painting. That was just really awesome. So it wasn't really on that darker side. It wasn't that macabre feel necessarily throughout most of the story. That is, until the very end. So of course, like in typical Poe fashion, it's right at the very end that he makes that statement that declares the truth about the subject. And it just kind of goes, huh. Honestly, it kind of gave me shivers right at the very end, which is just really, really awesome, because as we're describing this oval portrait and this oval painting, you just feel like there's so much love and life and vibrancy to the subject and to what is being done here. And then you're just hit right at the very end with the final blow and the truth about the subject of this painting. In like 4 words. That's all it takes. I don't want to spoil it for you in case you decide to read it, but definitely that was just really awesome way to end this story. And Poe is a classic of literary history for a reason. And that I just thought that was really well done, and I really, really enjoyed that part of it. All right, so the Purloined Letter. So this is a story about a letter that bestows upon its bearer supreme and great authority and power. It's a letter that comes from the French royalty, and it's been stolen by a scrupulous individual seeking power for himself and can use it to bad things. So this is basically another story of Dupin, which we first encountered in stories such as The Mystery of Marie Roget, as well as Murders in the Rue Morgue. So this is another Dupin story by Edgar Allen Poe, and like his other stories, really does stick to a particular formula with this story, in which we have the crime is stated as to what happened for the crime in question, and then Dupin follows up by explaining how he solved the crime and resolved it. So Dupin, I guess you could say, is kind of Edgar Allan Poe's version of Sherlock Holmes. He's a very smart person who uses the powers of deduction to resolve an issue or to solve a crime. So of course in this story we have basically the police chief from the Paris police come to Dupin saying, I need your help with this because I'm at a loss. I can't find a solution. I don't know what happened here, and it should be so simple. And yet, I'm still at a loss. I can't solve this mystery or this crime. And that's what Dupin kind of goes into, his explanation of what happened and how he solved it. There's a bit of dialogue between, of course, the French police and Dupin at first, where Dupin's asking some questions. The French police is describing everything they've done in the investigation up to that point, at which point Dupin solves the crime. So it's just kind of one of those, mystery crime type stories. I wouldn't say there's anything that's necessarily dark or death or thematic within this. It definitely doesn't have that feel to the Purloined Letter itself, but definitely kind of seems like Dupin, the character that Poe has created, which a third story of Dupin now with Edgar Allen Poe seems to really be focused on, or feels like it's kind of his version of Sherlock Holmes, as to solving crimes and mysteries and just kind of going through an analysis of what happened. So that's what we get with the Purloined Letter with Edgar Allan Poe. So not a deathly or disturbing tale by any means, but simply a crime mystery solved by our main character Dupin, which is okay. I have to say, like, I'm not a big fan of the Dupin tales. As far as Poe goes, I wouldn't put it at the top of the list of my favorite Poe tales by far. But definitely still kind of fun to see the analysis and the breakdown of how these crimes were solved and how we came to the conclusions that we did within this particular story and the other Dupin stories as well. But overall, still enjoyable as far as a Poe story goes. So, the 1002nd Tales of Scheberzade? I think I'm pronouncing that right. I honestly don't know. It's kind of one of those names where you can never be sure if you're actually pronouncing it right or not. Anyway, this is a story that kind of takes place in like this Persian Middle Eastern kingdom. From Poe's imagination, a king who has made this vow or this oath to a god where he would sleep with the most beautiful women in the land, and afterwards those women would have to die. He would kill them, he would get rid of them. And it's effectively causing this purge in this kingdom, of a purge of beauty, where all the beautiful women will eventually be gone, and the kingdom will be rid of beautiful women because of this oath that this king made. The king is described as being this extremely religious and devout individual who must keep his word to his god. Why he made this oath in the first place is never explained. Why this is part of his religion is never explained. But it's Poe's take on this story in his imagination, and we all know Poe loves to focus in around death and stuff like that within his books. It's what he's most known for. But what this tale involves is this one woman who finally stands up and says, enough is enough. You can't keep killing us all. There's going to be no more of us left. And I'm not going to take this anymore. So she proposes and she goes and marries this king with a plan in mind to end the slaughter of all these women and all these beautiful women which are dying at the hands of the king simply because the king sleeps with them. So she takes this opportunity, and her plan was to simply regale him with stories of all kinds of fantastical adventures and try and keep him distracted to avoid the inevitable slaughter. So she figures if she could get him to break his vow and break his religious observance, kill all the beautiful women he sleeps with, that she could end this cycle of this terror upon the land. Whether she's successful or not, who can say? Throughout the story, by the end of the story, we don't really know how successful she was. She herself does not survive. Sorry, should have put a spoiler alert, but let's face it, Poe stories have been out a long time. So that's definitely an interesting concept for a story. Seems kind of an odd story, but then again, this is Edgar Allan Poe. We can't necessarily expect that there's going to be what we might consider a not normal story. Poe stories are really focused on that darker thematic side, so we could expect to see that in pretty much every story of Poe, or at least most of them. So this was just kind of a fun read. Honestly, with the different tales of adventures and the descriptions of these insane and unbelievable things of these tales that are being regaled to us, and just all kinds of crazy stuff, to impossible events, to impossible people. Just in general, fun to read each and every little story. And the little stories within the story itself actually aren't that big. They're like these short, just a couple of paragraphs long at most. And between each story, we get a bit of the dialogue between the king and his new bride, who's distracting him with these tales in order to put off the inevitable fate which is going to become hers, because she has the intent of trying to end this senseless killing of beautiful women in her land. So that was kind of a fun read, fun to kind of chill with that and enjoy those crazy adventures and tales. So that was a fun one. All right, so A Descent into the Maelstrom. So this is another adventure at sea by Edgar Allan Poe. And it's a story about being on the ship who gets caught in the middle of this massive hurricane. And just the whole time that they're stuck in the hurricane, the description of the storm and the movement of the ship and everything that's going on around our characters and their eventual struggle for survival until the point where they barely survived this massacre or this destructive adventure at sea, or virtually everything is gone and people barely survive. So the Descent into Maelstrom, it's just, while you're reading it, you can really feel the vibe of the story. You can really kind of get a feel for the characters and the terror that they're under as the storm ravages and beats this ship, destroys the masts, and the wave fronts were going up on these massive waves and back down, and at any moment the ship could be destroyed and your life would be over as we know it. And it's just this insane descriptive story about what it's like to be trapped at sea on these ships in the middle of the ocean during a hurricane, and it's not fun at all. It is a high impact, high intensity situation for our characters, and just the description, you really kind of feel that you're there and you feel what the characters are feeling as you read this story, and it's just awesome and really enjoyable reading. Just as I'm reading, I could just kind of imagine and envision myself on this ship and imagine what it would be like to have these insanely strong winds blowing you around the deck and the massive waves crashing down over you as you're trying to survive in this absolutely brutal ocean storm, and wondering, is this the end for me? Is this the last I'm going to live? Am I going to survive? And just, it was just awesome. I don't know why. I'm not usually a big, ship, sea, voyage type reader, but it seems my favorite stories from this month's Poe Tales involve ships on the ocean at sea with the destruction and everything that comes with these massive high sea storms. So for whatever reason, I'm liking those the best this month of all the tales and stories from Edgar Allan Poe from this month. So maybe I like ocean stories a little bit more than I thought. Who knows? But anyway, the Descent into Maelstrom was just a high seas adventure and a good, enjoyable overall read from Poe for this month. So definitely, I think it's one of the Poe stories that would be worth checking out, along with Message in a Bottle. As far as his ocean voyages go, I'm not sure if there's any more of the Lost at Sea type stories from Poe, but we'll find out as we read through the collected works. Vonkempler and His Discovery. So this is a story about a man who was not really all that well off, and he was doing okay, but not really great or anything like that. Like most people, doesn't have super amount of riches, managing of finances, running into troubled times, things like that. But essentially, Vonkempler's discovery is, and one day he becomes rich almost overnight. Essentially, he suddenly has money to do whatever he wants. He's buying fancy new houses. He's doing whatever he can, basically because he has all this sudden wealth, and suspicion falls upon him because of this sudden wealth that he has managed to achieve. And he's thought to be a counterfeiter, and he's arrested and he's put to the question, but the police can't find anything to stick to him to show that he's actually committed any kind of crime. But they follow him to discover his secret, to figure out, how did he suddenly become so rich? Where did all this wealth and money come from, and why is he suddenly able to have all this money he didn't have before, which led to that immediate suspicion of whether or not he obtained his newfound financial wealth and resources legally. So his discovery is that of being able to change lead to gold. And that was the discovery that he had. So it's almost like the Midas touch, where everything he touches turns to gold. And he's discovered how to make this transition and how to change the properties of lead into gold. And so that is his discovery, which winds him up in all kinds of trouble. But of course, you know, Vonkempler doesn't share the wealth, and nobody else really knows how he did it, only that he managed to do it, and that's how he became super wealthy. So that's the basic concept behind the story of Vonkempler and his discovery. And of course, we all know you can't really turn lead to gold. That's all fantasy, but still a good read about quick ascendancy to wealth, the suspicion that falls on the individual, and of course the inevitable conclusion of we learn how he got rich so quick, which was turning that lead into gold. So that was kind of a fun short read, one of the shorter stories, I believe, from this month's Collected Works video edition. But definitely, hey, if I could turn lead to gold and then turn that gold into cash, I mean, who wouldn't be tempted to do that, right? Of course, I'd hope after reading this, if I ever learn how to do that, I'd be a little bit smarter in how much wealth I'd suddenly bestow upon myself. But at the end of the day, you know, it's not a counterfeit operation. And just, you know, a fun little read about turning lead to gold. I mean, that's kind of everyone's fantasy. This has been something that has been discussed in many different stories, and the whole idea of this type of transmutation is certainly not new in literary history or fashion. And now we know we can't do it, but hey, it was always fun to imagine, right? And finally, the last story from today's video on Edgar Allan Poe and his collected works is the Mesmeric Revelation. This is actually a really interesting story, and it's definitely unique in the set of stories that that I have read over this month from the collected works of Edgar Allan Poe. This story is definitely much more blatant and obvious in its philosophical underpinnings and ideology that's being expressed within this story. So the basic idea of the Mesmeric Revelation is, you know, it's talking about the person who's under this mesmeric condition or mesmeric revelation is just a sleepwalker. But at the end of the day, it really felt more like a hypnotist talking to someone who was under hypnosis. And so we have our patient, or the guy that's under the hypnosis within this story, having a conversation with another individual, and they're talking about the philosophical implications of the nature of God and what is God. You know, who is God? What is matter? And you know, is matter God? Is matter thought? Is God thought? And then the physical manifestation of God, is that the matter that is created because we think of God, God thinks of matter. We're here as a result of God thinking of the physical substance that we are. And it's just this perpetual circle kind of idea. So it is a very philosophical take on the question of God, as far as a conversation about the nature of God and who God is, what God is, how does God come into existence, and why is God here. And that's a really, you know, from Poe, I gotta be honest, I didn't expect a philosophical discussion about God, at least not necessarily. Like, I definitely knew there was some philosophical ideas permeating Poe's works in general, but it was just really interesting to see that discussion and perspective on the philosophical question of what or who is God and how does God exist, and whether God is just an existence of our minds, or if our thoughts create the reality of God, or is it that God creates the reality of us and we're here as a result. So it's really kind of an interesting way to look at the question of God overall through the setting and storyline of an individual under hypnosis who is having this discussion about his thoughts and his ideas regarding the nature of God. So that was a really, really interesting read and a really interesting take on that whole position and how it was, or how the story was set up as a medium in which to have this discussion. That was a fun, entertaining read. And definitely, you know, if I were to pick my three favorite, I guess, from this month's books, we would definitely have to go with The Message in a Bottle, Descent into Maelstrom and the Mesmeric Revelation. So yeah, there you have it. There are my stories for Edgar Allen Poe for this month. That's 7 stories from Poe that I'm bringing you this month, and those are the ones that I read, and I certainly enjoyed them. And you know, if you like Poe, I'm sure you'll enjoy them too. And you know, I hope that you're enjoying this video series. I know I'm enjoying going through all of Edgar Allan Poe's collected works and poems this year, and really enjoying making these videos about that. So, you know, as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you like this content. You can also join me on Patreon. I will have the link tree in my profile or in the description below, as well as the link to Patreon. And I do have a Discord if you want to join me there. And, you know, if the link isn't working for Patreon, just click on the Linktree link. That always seems to work, but for some reason the links seem to get broken after I put them in sometimes. But in any case, check that out. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time on the next episode of Drew's Book Reviews. Until then, keep on reading. Bye.